The aroma of freshly baked bread, usually a comforting embrace, was heavy with the underlying scent of fear in Saint-Pierre. It was June 1944, and every breath taken in France was a silent prayer against the suffocating grip of war. Isabelle Dubois, a young woman in her early 20s, moved with practiced grace within the familiar confines of her family's bakery. The fierce heat radiating from the brick oven did little to dispel the constant chill that settled deep in her stomach. Her hands, calloused and strong from kneading countless loaves, harbored a secret passion, the intricate world of electronics. Hours vanished as she meticulously dismantled and reassembled old radios, captivated by the hidden networks of wires and the distant, unseen voices they could conjure. However, since the dark cloud of occupation had descended, all radios had been confiscated, forcing her beloved hobby deep into the shadows of memory. That morning, the bakery, usually bustling with the chatter of villagers, was eerily quiet. The residents of Saint-Pierre lived on a knife's edge, their hearts suspended in anxious anticipation. News, whispers of Allied landings in Normandy, offered a fragile, almost imperceptible thread of hope. The sudden, violent screech of tires startled everyone as a military truck, emblazoned with the French resistance emblem, skidded to a halt outside. 3 figures, uniformed and utterly spent, their faces etched with the grime of battle and profound exhaustion, dismounted. Lieutenant Henri Dubois, Isabelle's father, and a man revered in their small community, emerged from the bakery's warm interior to meet them. He was a man of few words, but the deepening lines around his eyes spoke volumes of his growing unease. General Lefebvre, a man whose imposing stature seemed diminished by the sheer weight of his weariness, slowly descended from the truck, a heavy communication radio clutched in his hands. "Lieutenant Dubois," he rasped, his voice raw, "we're in dire straits. Our main comms unit is dead, utterly useless. We're blind, cut off from command. The entire front is exposed if we can't report our position, if we can't warn them of the enemy's movements." The other soldiers, their shoulders slumped in defeat, nodded grimly. They had exhausted every option, tried every trick. The radio was nothing more than a lifeless hunk of metal. Isabelle watched, unmoving from the bakery's arched doorway. She saw the raw despair in the general's eyes, the deep lines of worry etched onto her father's face. The radio, a robust military model, looked incredibly complex, far beyond the civilian sets she tinkered with. Yet a peculiar intuition, a sudden surge of conviction, whispered to her that perhaps, just perhaps, she could be of use. It was a minuscule chance, she knew, but the grim alternative, to do nothing, was a risk far too great to bear. If you're enjoying this gripping story and want to follow the unfolding plot of courage and ingenuity, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us tell more untold stories from history. Isabelle drew a shaky breath, then, with a surprising burst of resolve, stepped out from the shadowy doorway. "General," she began, her voice a little unsteady, yet remarkably firm. "My name is Isabelle Dubois. I understand a bit about radios. Perhaps I could just take a look?" The general, visibly startled by her unexpected appearance, regarded her with a heavy dose of skepticism. He was accustomed to the company of grizzled engineers and battle-hardened strategists, not a young woman from a small-town bakery. But desperation, often a cruel master, has a way of prying open doors that would otherwise remain stubbornly shut. Henri, sensing the quiet conviction radiating from his daughter, offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. "You understand radios, mademoiselle?" General Lefebvre's eyebrows arched in disbelief. "This is military-grade equipment designed for the rigors of combat, not some parlor gramophone." His tone was dismissive, tinged with the frustration of a man at his wit's end. "I know it's different, General," Isabelle replied, her gaze unwavering, meeting his skeptical stare head-on. but the fundamental principles often remain the same. Sometimes it's just a small detail, a loose connection, a tiny break in the circuit. Her hands, though small and delicately shaped, held an innate strength and precision. She possessed an uncanny aptitude for understanding the inner workings of machinery, a natural curiosity that had quietly blossomed in the solitude of her family home. The general, seeing no other viable option, no other glimmer of possibility, exhaled a weary sigh. "Very well, mademoiselle, but understand this. Time is of the essence. Every minute we are without communication, we are blind out there." He handed her the heavy radio, its metal casing scratched and dulled by countless patrols and rough handling. Isabelle carefully cradled the precious device, carrying it inside and gently placing it on a clean wooden table in the quiet back section of the bakery, far from the flour dust and the rising dough. Under the wary, scrutinizing eyes of the soldiers, their skepticism slowly softening into a hesitant curiosity, Isabelle began her work. From a hidden drawer beneath the counter, she retrieved a small, worn leather pouch, her personal toolkit. Inside lay an old, familiar screwdriver, a pair of fine-tipped tweezers, and a small, rusted soldering iron that she meticulously heated over a tiny spirit lamp. The sharp, acrid aroma of melting solder soon began to mingle with the fading, sweet scent of baked bread. Her father watched, a complex mix of anxious apprehension and quiet pride flickering in his eyes. He knew Isabelle's unique talent, but this moment was different, a critical juncture far beyond the simple repair of a household radio. The immense weight of the front line, the very fate of so many lives, now rested precariously on her slender, capable shoulders. Isabelle worked with an almost surgical meticulousness, her movements deliberate and precise. She carefully unlatched and removed the back panel of the radio, revealing a dizzying labyrinth of intricate wires, glowing vacuum tubes, and tightly packed components. The soldiers, including the stoic general, leaned closer, their initial skepticism gradually dissolving into a fascinated silence. The air in the small bakery was thick with tension, punctuated only by the soft, rhythmic click of her screwdriver, each gentle tug on a wire echoing in the sudden quiet. She meticulously examined every connection, every joint, her keen eyes searching for the slightest sign of damage, a loose solder joint, or a frayed wire. The internal workings of this military radio were far more robust than any civilian model she had encountered, built to withstand the brutal rigors of combat, but also far more complex, a testament to its critical function. "It looks like some of these resistors are burnt out," she murmured almost to herself, her slender finger tracing the charred remnants of a component. "And this capacitor, it appears to have shorted completely." The soldiers exchanged baffled glances. These were alien terms, a language of circuits and current utterly beyond their comprehension. Yet Isabelle spoke with a quiet, unwavering authority that hinted at a deep, intuitive understanding. She patiently explained, in simple, clear terms, how each tiny component contributed to the smooth flow of signals, how a single, seemingly insignificant failure could render the entire complex system utterly useless. The most daunting obstacle was the desperate lack of replacement parts. Saint-Pierre was merely a small dot on the map, a quiet town ravaged by the war, which had relentlessly severed most supply lines. Isabelle's mind raced, sifting through her memories. She suddenly recalled an old broken radio tucked away in the dusty attic of their house, a forgotten relic from before the war, one her grandfather used to listen to distant, exotic broadcasts. "Father," she looked up, her eyes bright with a sudden idea. "Do you remember Grandpa's old Philips radio in the attic? It might have some compatible parts, just what I need." Henri, surprised by her uncanny resourcefulness, even under such immense pressure, nodded without a word and quickly ascended the creaking stairs to the attic. The general, Witnessing this unexpected, almost miraculous solution, felt a powerful flicker of genuine, unyielding hope ignite within him. Henri returned moments later, a cloud of dust preceding him, carrying the cumbersome antique radio. Its wooden casing was warped with age, its tuning knobs long since seized. Isabelle, without hesitation, quickly set about dismantling it, her movements precise and efficient. She carefully salvaged vital components, a few resistors, remarkably similar in value, and a small capacitor that, by some sheer miracle, seemed to perfectly match the specifications required by the military radio. Her hands worked with the delicate precision of a surgeon, nimble yet firm, extracting each piece as if it were pure gold. The soldiers, who had been observing with a mixture of apprehension and wonder, now watched in absolute silence, their initial skepticism completely replaced by a growing fascination and profound awe. The process of delicately soldering the newly acquired components into place was painstakingly slow and agonizingly precise. The small soldering iron, barely hot enough for the demanding task, required constant attention, heated again and again over the sputtering spirit lamp. Isabelle's brow was deeply furrowed in intense concentration, a single bead of sweat tracing a slow, precise path down her temple. The general, who had initially paced the bakery floor with barely contained impatience, now stood utterly still, his gaze fixed, unblinking, on her every minute movement. The fate of the entire front line, the lives of countless men, now hung precariously on this young woman's singular ability. Hours crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity. The warm, late-afternoon sun began its descent, casting long, distorted shadows across the worn bakery floor. Finally, with a sigh of immense relief, Isabelle carefully reassembled the radio's casing, her fingers stiff and sore, her mind utterly drained. She methodically connected the external antenna and the power source. The moment of truth, a terrifying precipice had arrived. With a trembling finger, she flicked a switch, and a faint, almost imperceptible hum emanated from the machine. The general and his men held their breath, their eyes wide with an almost unbearable anticipation. The hum gradually grew stronger, a fragile vibration of life, and then a sharp electric crackle. A voice, distorted and faint, but undeniably present, filled the quiet room. It was a weak signal, barely a whisper, but it was there. "This is Alpha Sector. Any units respond? Over." General Lefebvre practically lunged for the microphone, his movements sudden and desperate. "Alpha Sector, this is General Lefebvre. Bravo unit. We read you. Repeat, we read you. Do you copy, Alpha Sector?" The sheer, overwhelming relief that washed over his face was almost tangible, a raw mix of profound disbelief and immense unspoken gratitude. If you're gripped by this tale of courage and ingenuity and want to see how one person can change the course of history, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Every single subscriber helps us bring more untold, powerful stories to light. The crackling voice emanating from the radio was more than just a sound. It was a lifeline, a desperately needed rope thrown to men teetering on the brink of isolation. General Lefebvre, his voice hoarse with adrenaline and relief, immediately began to relay critical, time-sensitive information. He spoke rapidly, detailing the enemy's troop movements, their strategic strongholds, and the rapidly dwindling ammunition supplies of his men. Isabelle stood quietly nearby, listening intently, the sheer immense weight of the war now a tangible, crushing presence in the small, usually tranquil bakery. She understood, with a sudden, profound clarity, the true impact of her work. It wasn't merely about fixing a broken machine, but about forging a connection that could, quite literally, save countless lives. The conversations that transpired over the radio were terse, urgent, and laden with unspoken tension. The general received new, grim orders. hold their current position at all costs, prepare for reinforcements, and provide constant, minute-by-minute updates on the enemy's activities. The tone of the High Command was stark, echoing the dire situation. But the sheer fact that they could communicate at all was, in itself, an unexpected and profound victory. The initial despair that had clung to the soldiers' faces had been slowly, almost imperceptibly, replaced by a renewed, grim sense of purpose. They were no longer abandoned, isolated. They were once again an integral part of a larger, ongoing, desperate effort. Isabelle felt a surge of exhilaration, a rush of adrenaline, but it was quickly tempered by a deep, almost crushing sense of responsibility. She knew with chilling certainty that the radio was fragile, a delicate network of intricate components that could fail again at any moment without warning. Her work, she understood, was far from over. She had to ensure it kept working, that the fragile communication line remained open, a constant beacon in the gathering darkness. The enemy could be anywhere, lurking in the shadows, and every single piece of information, every crackle of static, was absolutely vital. The air in the bakery, once permeated by the comforting aroma of baked bread, now vibrated with the raw, electric tension of war, a tension that she, the quiet baker's daughter, had inadvertently become a crucial part of. The days blurred into a relentless cycle, indistinguishable from one another. The bakery, once a haven of warmth and domesticity, had seamlessly transformed into a makeshift, bustling command post. Isabelle worked tirelessly, her attention unwavering, meticulously monitoring the radio, making subtle, precise adjustments to ensure the signal remained crystal clear. Her father, Henri, a silent pillar of unwavering support, stood by her, ensuring she had food and precious moments of rest, even as he steadfastly continued his own demanding work in the bakery. The soldiers, who had initially regarded her with cautious skepticism, now treated her with an immense, heartfelt respect, even open admiration, their eyes reflecting a newfound trust. They brought her hastily scribbled maps, whispered hushed pieces of intelligence, trusting her innate ability to decipher the significance of every crackle, every faint hum from the radio. Isabelle, to her own surprise, discovered a hidden, almost uncanny talent for understanding the intricate nuances of radio signals. The barely perceptible whispers that hinted at distant enemy movements, the subtle shifts in frequency that suggested desperate jamming attempts. She became, almost by accident, an unofficial yet indispensable member of the unit. The general, a man of profound experience, now relied heavily on her unique insights, consulting her before every critical transmission, valuing her razor-sharp instincts as much as any military intelligence report. He saw in her not merely a baker's daughter, but a highly skilled technician, a vital, irreplaceable asset in the desperate, grinding struggle for freedom. The weather outside was often bleak and unforgiving, with sporadic, chilling rain showers transforming the already treacherous dirt roads into thick, treacherous mud. The constant looming threat of unseen enemy patrols made every journey outside the safe confines of the bakery an extremely dangerous undertaking. Yet, within the warm, flower-dusted interior of the bakery, a strange, profound sense of camaraderie began to bloom. The shared purpose, the constant exhausting vigilance against a common enemy, forged an unbreakable bond between the battle-hardened soldiers and the quiet baker's family. Isabelle, once a solitary girl engrossed in her private hobby, was now undeniably at the very heart of the war effort in Saint-Pierre, her capable hands holding the fragile yet utterly vital thread of communication that connected the desperate front lines to the distant flickering flame of hope. The days bled relentlessly into weeks, each one a testament to their enduring resilience. The front lines shifted with agonizing slowness, sometimes favoring the beleaguered allies, sometimes brutally tipping the scales in favor of the relentless enemy. Isabelle's radio, a humble yet powerful instrument, had truly become the throbbing heartbeat of General Lefebvre's beleaguered unit, providing crucial, real-time intelligence that allowed them to anticipate cunning enemy maneuvers and coordinate desperate, precise actions with distant Allied forces. Her contributions, often unseen and unheralded, proved utterly invaluable, directly saving lives and providing crucial strategic advantages in a war where every inch of ground, every single life, counted. She wasn't fighting with a rifle in the muddy trenches, but with the sharp precision of her mind and the steady skill of her hands, a different yet equally vital kind of soldier. One particularly grim evening, as the last vestiges of dusk began to settle heavily over Saint-Pierre, painting the sky in bruised purples and greys, Isabelle detected a chilling, unmistakable change in the enemy's radio traffic. The signals, usually fragmented and sporadic, like whispers in the wind, suddenly became more organized, more frequent, imbued with a new, unsettling urgency. There was a palpable sense of building tension, a systematic communication build-up that screamed of a major, impending offensive. Her heart pounded in her chest as she immediately alerted General Lefebvre, her voice laced with grave concern. "General," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "they are preparing something immense, something big. The frequency is overloaded, completely jammed with their chatter, and the patterns, they're entirely different from anything I've heard before." The general, his face grim but his trust in her absolute, immediately ordered his exhausted men to reinforce their already tenuous positions, dispatching small, stealthy reconnaissance teams to verify Isabelle's chilling assessment. The tension within the quiet bakery was almost unbearable, a suffocating blanket. The air itself felt thick with the bitter scent of fear and a chilling anticipation. Outside, the wind howled through the narrow streets of Saint-Pierre, a mournful lament mirroring the terrible storm that was rapidly brewing on the darkening horizon. Isabelle stayed glued to the radio, her ears straining, aching to catch every nuance, every coded word, every faint whisper that might betray the enemy's next devastating move. She knew, with a terrifying certainty, that any misstep, any misdetail, however small, could unleash catastrophic consequences for the brave men holding the fragile front line. Are you on the edge of your seat, compelled by Isabelle's unwavering spirit and quick thinking? Don't miss how her bravery continues to shape the course of the war. Subscribe now to follow this incredible, true-to-life drama and support more stories of hidden heroes. Isabelle's chilling warning proved to be tragically accurate. Early the very next morning, as a faint grey light barely touched the sky, a fierce, relentless enemy assault began. The guttural roar of distant gunfire and the ground-shaking concussions of explosions relentlessly rattled the fragile windows of the small town. The general's unit, forewarned by Isabelle's keen ear, was able to hold their precarious ground, bravely repelling the initial, furious waves of attack. However, the sheer, overwhelming force of the enemy was undeniable, a crushing tide against their meager defenses, and maintaining communication became paramount, a matter of life and death. The radio, their fragile lifeline to the outside world, was under constant brutal strain. During a particularly intense and deafening exchange of fire, a direct hit from a devastating artillery shell landed dangerously close, sending a violent shockwave through their makeshift command post. The radio, in response, crackled violently, emitting a tortured shriek of static, then, with a horrifying finality, went utterly silent. A wave of profound despair instantly washed over the faces of the war-weary soldiers. The precious connection was severed, lost in the chaos, and with it, their desperate ability to call for vital reinforcements or report their dire, rapidly deteriorating situation. General Lefebvre slammed his fist onto the table, his face a mask of grim, absolute defeat. "No," he roared, his voice raw with anguish. "Not now! Not like this!" Isabelle, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, rushed to the now silent radio. The brutal power surge had not only blown a critical fuse, but had also visibly damaged several internal connections, leaving a faint smell of burnt electronics in the air. She worked with feverish intensity, her trembling fingers moving with a desperate urgency, yet still maintaining an underlying precision. The terrifying sounds of battle outside, the relentless gunfire and explosions, grew louder, closer, the very ground vibrating beneath their feet. Time was brutally, agonizingly running out. She suddenly remembered a spare fuse from an old, discarded lamp her father had been meaning to fix, and with a burst of frantic energy, quickly retrieved it from a dusty corner. Her father, his face pale with worry, stood by her side, silently handing her tools, a stoic, unwavering pillar of support in the heart of the storm. With a desperate, final surge of adrenaline and an unyielding will, she painstakingly replaced the blown fuse and meticulously resoldered the damaged connections, her vision blurring from the intense concentration, sweat stinging her eyes. She powered the radio on again, a silent, fervent prayer on her lips. For an agonizing, endless moment, there was nothing but the infuriating hiss of static, then a faint, almost imperceptible, but utterly familiar hum. A voice, barely audible at first but strengthening with each passing second, crackled through the speaker, cutting through the din of battle. "Bravo, unit! Do you read? Repeat! Bravo, unit! Do you read?" General Lefebvre snatched the microphone, his hands trembling slightly, his voice hoarse with a profound, almost overwhelming mixture of relief and desperate urgency. "We read you. We are under heavy assault. Repeat, heavy assault. Request immediate air support and reinforcements to grid coordinates." He rattled off the precise coordinates, his voice unwavering despite the concussive explosions that continued to shake the very foundations of the building. Isabelle, utterly exhausted but radiant with a quiet triumph, watched as the general relayed the critical, life-saving information, providing precise details about the enemy's insidious flanking maneuvers and their own rapidly dwindling ammunition supplies. Within what felt like mere seconds, the distant thundering roar of Allied aircraft began to fill the smoke-filled sky. Shadows of massive bombers swept across the battered landscape. Explosions, now distinct from the battle below, rained down on the enemy positions, unleashing a devastating barrage that instantly disrupted their relentless advance and sent waves of chaos through their ranks. Soon after, the earth-shaking rumble of approaching tanks and the triumphant arrival of fresh, battle-ready troops signaled the desperately needed reinforcements. The tide of the brutal battle, which had seemed so insurmountable moments before, began to inexorably turn. The enemy, caught completely by surprise by the sudden, coordinated resistance and the devastating air support, began to break ranks, their assault crumbling into a disorganized retreat. The battle eventually subsided, leaving behind a scarred, smoldering landscape, but also a resounding, hard-won victory for the Allied forces. General Lefebvre's unit, battered and weary but remarkably resilient, had held their critical ground. He turned to Isabelle, his eyes shining with a profound, unspoken gratitude that words alone felt utterly insufficient to express. He extended his hand, grasping hers firmly, his grip strong and warm. "Mademoiselle Dubois," he said, his voice thick with raw emotion, "you saved us, you saved the front. You are unequivocally a true hero." The soldiers, their faces streaked with grime and exhaustion, but alive and victorious, cheered for her, their respect boundless, their relief palpable. The echoes of war eventually faded, and the gentle rhythms of life, slowly, tentatively, returned to Saint-Pierre. The deep, indelible scars of conflict remained etched upon the landscape and in the hearts of its people, But so too did the unyielding spirit of resilience and community. Isabelle Dubois, the quiet, unassuming baker's daughter, returned to her familiar life at the bakery, the comforting scent of fresh bread once again filling her days, a soothing balm after the storm. Yet she was no longer merely the baker's daughter. She carried within her the quiet, profound knowledge of her extraordinary contribution, a true unsung hero of the French resistance, her actions speaking volumes where words were unnecessary. Her profound passion for electronics endured, though now she channeled it into helping her community, meticulously fixing old radios for her neighbors, reconnecting them to the outside world, to voices of hope and normalcy. She never sought recognition, preferring to let her actions, her quiet acts of service, speak for themselves. The general, however, a man of integrity and memory, never forgot her. He would visit the bakery occasionally, not as a decorated military leader, but as a friend, sharing quiet stories and warm coffee, a silent, profound acknowledgement of their shared, unforgettable past. Isabelle's story quietly became a local legend in Saint-Pierre, a whispered testament to the profound truth that heroism manifests in countless forms, often emerging from the most unexpected, unassuming places. Her bravery wasn't about grand, flamboyant gestures or the brutal glory of the battlefield, but about the sharp ingenuity of her mind, the unwavering determination of her spirit, and the quiet, extraordinary courage to make a crucial difference when it mattered most. Her hands, once simply covered in flour, had, for a brief but utterly critical period, delicately held the very fate of the front line in their capable grasp, proving beyond doubt that even in the darkest, most despairing moments, hope could be found, nurtured and ignited in the most unassuming of places. If this compelling, true-to-life story of an unsung hero resonated with you, and you wish to discover more powerful tales of human strength, resilience, and ingenuity in the face of adversity, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your invaluable support truly helps us share these deeply moving narratives with a wider audience, honoring the quiet heroes who shaped history.